They're getting some breaking news in the investigation into the disappearance of Nancy Guthrie.
Nancy Guthrie update exposes shocking errors. Nancy Guthrie latest news reveals what went wrong. The problem wasn't that the case was too complicated. The problem was that the people walking into that house acted like they had never handled a scene like this before. And according to a retired FBI agent who spent decades running major investigations, that should never happen. When law enforcement arrives at a possible crime scene, confusion is not supposed to exist. Not for 5 minutes. Not for 1 hour. Especially not in a disappearance involving an elderly woman, blood at the home, and a family already panicking. The first officers on scene are trained for exactly this kind of moment. They know the sequence. They know the protocol. They know how to lock a scene down before chaos starts destroying evidence. But in the first hours after Nancy Guthrie vanished from her home in the Catalina foothills, that structure reportedly collapsed. A sergeant from the sheriff's department later described the first week as chaotic. Detectives were receiving conflicting information. Communication inside the department was breaking down. Coordination with the FBI was strained almost immediately. Family members were moving through the house. Emotions were taking over. And according to the retired agent reviewing the situation, all of that points to one thing: nobody established control fast enough. Because in a properly managed investigation, there is always one person running the play. The retired agent compared it to building a wall brick by brick. Every task has to happen in order. One team secures the perimeter. Another separates witnesses. Another begins documenting evidence. Somebody interviews family members individually while investigators compare statements privately. Every person has a defined role before confusion gets a chance to spread. That did not appear to happen here. Instead, information was reportedly flowing from multiple directions at once. Family members initially believed Nancy may have wandered away voluntarily. Detectives were trying to process a scene while emotional relatives remained nearby. And all of that matters because the moment a scene loses control, evidence starts disappearing. The retired agent used a comparison investigators immediately understood. Showing up late to a crime scene is like arriving late to a buffet. The important parts may already be gone. And once they're gone, you don't get another chance. That matters because the house itself may have contained everything investigators needed in the first few hours. Blood was reportedly discovered near the front porch. That instantly turns both the interior and exterior into potential evidence zones. Tire tracks in the driveway. Fingerprints on door handles. DNA on counters, walls, switches, flooring. Every inch matters. Every person walking through that environment risks changing it forever. And according to the retired agent, the most dangerous evidence is usually the evidence nobody can see. People hear investigators say they found only one hair or one trace sample and assume that was all that existed. But experienced investigators think differently. If one hair was found, there were probably more. If one microscopic trace survived, others likely existed somewhere nearby. Because people do not enter a home, leave a single strand of evidence, and disappear without touching anything else. They breathe. They brush against furniture. They touch doors. They lean on counters. They shed skin cells constantly. Every movement leaves microscopic traces behind. The challenge is finding them before contamination destroys them. And contamination becomes a serious issue when a scene is not secured immediately. The house was reportedly opened, closed, and re-entered multiple times during the first week. The FBI evidence response team did not arrive until several days later. By then, according to the retired agent, the scene had already changed. Foot traffic alone can compromise evidence permanently. Add environmental exposure, repeated movement through rooms, and delayed forensic processing, and investigators may lose details they never even realized were there. The retired agent was careful not to attack local investigators personally. He emphasized that smaller sheriff departments often lack the manpower and technology available to federal agencies. The difference is resources. The FBI can deploy specialized forensic teams rapidly, bringing advanced equipment and technicians trained specifically for major scenes. Smaller departments often have to work with limited staffing, smaller budgets, and fewer forensic tools. That gap can become critical in the first 48 hours of a major case. And then came the public conflict. FBI Director Kash Patel reportedly criticized the sheriff publicly, saying the bureau had been kept at a distance during the early days of the investigation. According to public statements, the FBI had resources ready, including rapid DNA transport capabilities, but local leadership chose a different path initially. The retired agent described that public criticism as the nuclear option. because relationships between federal and local agencies depend heavily on trust. FBI field offices work with local departments constantly across the country. Problems are usually handled privately. Publicly embarrassing another agency can damage cooperation long after one case ends. Still, the retired agent believed the criticism may have been intended to break a deadlock. A message that investigators inside the FBI were frustrated with how slowly the case was moving. Whether that strategy helps or hurts remains unclear. But the larger concern remains the same. What may have been missed during those first critical hours? The retired agent repeatedly returned to the idea of invisible evidence. Fingerprints are not obvious from across a room. Touch DNA cannot be seen with the naked eye. Hair fibers disappear into carpeting and upholstery. A poorly controlled scene can destroy critical evidence before investigators even know it exists. And if Nancy's body is eventually located, investigators may receive a second opportunity they did not have at the beginning. The location itself could answer major questions. A remote disposal site might indicate a larger vehicle or knowledge of isolated terrain. Tire tracks could narrow vehicle types. Soil transfer could connect locations. Insect activity could help establish timelines. Even advanced decomposition can still preserve valuable forensic evidence. More importantly, a recovery scene would allow agencies to process evidence together from the start instead of trying to reconstruct mistakes afterward. A wide perimeter could be established immediately. FBI specialists and local investigators could coordinate simultaneously. Every movement could be documented from the beginning rather than revisited later. Because the retired agent made one point painfully clear throughout the entire discussion. You can recover from bad luck in an investigation. You can recover from limited leads. But recovering from mistakes made during the first hours of a crime scene is much harder. Once evidence disappears, it usually stays gone. Nancy Guthrie remains missing. The investigation continues. DNA evidence is still reportedly being analyzed. Officials insist progress is being made. But according to a veteran investigator who spent decades handling cases exactly like this one, the biggest question may not be what investigators found inside that house. It may be what they failed to preserve before the chaos began.